This is the sound that we're after. Now you might not realise, but this is an E chord. Right? Now you're going, Ricky, hang on. That's an E chord there. But listen, can you hear it's voiced differently? And this is the whole thing. What I'm hoping that you have at the end of this lesson is a little playground in E major, this little playground that you will be able to muck around in. You just have a lot of fun. It is a fun thing to play. I muck around in this all the time. I warm up in it, but if I wanted to bluesify a song, I would change these chords. So you can actually use this to take normal songs. You could take an Ed Sheeran song, for example, and completely jimmify it. So we've got a fretboard here. We've got what I think of this shape as being a G chord. And what we've got, now, I just want you to see this here. I've not written the rest of the notes in here. This is going to be a G chord. If you just play those three strings there open, the D string, the G string, and the B string, those notes create a G major chord. Without putting anything else on, that's still going to be a G chord all day. Now, you might be used to seeing it with this configuration here. I'll do it in what I call the Dylan G there. So you can see that's a G chord there. We have that chord under there. Now this bit here is super useful. So if you know anything about how chords and triads are formed, you know from the master triads that what happens is it goes like this. It goes root, third, fifth. We've got this little thing that goes around like this when we do the master triads. If we started on the root, this is going to be called a root position triad. If we started on the third, it would be a first inversion triad. And then if we started on this fifth, then this would be the second inversion. Right, so we have these three here, and just goes round and round in this, does the master triads. And you can see here the pattern actually forms itself here. Look, root, third, fifth. If I go from the third, I get third, fifth, root. Third, fifth, root. If I stop here, I go fifth, root, third, fifth, root, third. You can see I get that A shape there. Now, that's as amenable as it really gets, because you're going to be hunting around for the fifth, which would be there. And that gives me that variation chord, which is the Oasis G. And that has the two notes there, and it strips away one of the thirds, which is kind of nice. We're going to look at this idea here. We don't want this big G chord here. And the reason, if I want to transpose a G shape up the neck, Eyup, if you're sick of pausing my YouTube lessons and scribbling down chords and diagrams, well, I've got you. PDF Club gives you a library of over 350 exclusive downloadable and printable guitar handouts and PDFs with chord charts, diagrams and worksheets all ready to rock. Just grab what you need and get back to playing. It's the perfect partner for my YouTube video lessons. Check it out now at rickysguitar.com/get PDF Club. Now back to the lesson. Okay, so we've got this. Now if I wanted this to become an A chord, what I could do is I can move the G shape up. But what I have to do is, remember, the head note acts like a capo or a finger, which is the same as a bar. I could kind of do that, which is unnecessary. But if I wanted to turn this into an A major chord, then what I would do is I'd move that up and I would bar the second fret. And that isn't a comfortable shape, yes? Now it does get a bit more comfortable as we go up. So now I've got it on this C note here at the 8th fret. So this gives me the G shape here with a bar. Yeah, but it isn't the most convenient shape. We're not going to play that full shape. We're going to just get rid of a lot of the fluff, because really all we need for this to be a triad is a root, a third and a fifth. And we've got that there in that second inversion there, because this goes fifth, root, third. Fifth, root, third. You can see there, fifth, root, third. Now, we're just going to add that. And effectively, we're going to dismiss this note here. We're not going to do that one there, and we're not going to do that one there. So really, that's all we've got. Now, if you think what I was saying to you, why this was important here was because this shape here is really, it's an A shape, guys. So if you think about how the CAGED sequence goes, it goes C, A, G, E, and D. So let me put that in as an A chord here. I'm going to put it in there. 5R3. What I want you to do with this is I want you to see what I call the intersect. There's an intersect between two of the chords. So like I say, this is an A shape. And if we think about the chords and we're going from an A chord in the sequence C, A, G, E, D, because that's what the CAGED system is. After the A shape, we would use a G shape. And I just showed you how difficult that can be. So really, what we're going to do is we're going to put that third on there, and that replicates this pattern just there. That's extending it, but because it's starting on the third there, we essentially got this first inversion. I'm actually going to kill that string as well, just like I did there. I'm not going to play either of the E strings. I could, and I'll do them in brackets because they're not really there. These notes aren't really there. You can visualize the root note there. You could visualize the root note there, which is always going to be useful. Hang on, let's just count up from the head note as well. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the 5th fret there. Put another fret on there. We've got that 5th fret. If we know from our musical alphabet, let's look at it from notes. We'd have an E, an F, a G. I'm only using natural notes. And then we would get an A there. So that double clarifies what's going on here. So we've got this shape here. Now this becomes a totally transposable shape, yeah, and that's what we're looking at today. But the thing that I think is interesting, that I really want you to see, is this part here. And this is the intersect. So you see how this chord hooks up into this chord shape here. So hopefully you can see how that works there, guys. So you can see we've got the A shape merging into the G shape there. So that is still going to be the G shape, but we're going to modify it. And that's where this version in the lesson, in the book, comes in now. So let me just take that a little bit further. We've got this A chord here. There's the standard A. If we want to turn this into, this is a G shape as far as I'm concerned, yeah? I could put those notes on there. There's the rest of the G shape, yeah? Do you see what's going on there? Putting those two on there, that fleshes out the rest of the shape, but you can't pick and strum if you're holding those two fingers on there as well. So really what we're doing is we're just playing the A, D, G and B string there, and I get this chord shape here. Not playing the E string and not playing the other E string as well. That's an A-shaped A, but I'm thinking of this as being a G-shaped. Can you see the G shape there? If I get rid of the bar and I put my capo on. Now I get rid of that. Okay? But that is essentially a different way to get to that first inversion. So we've got this A shape here. Now, just because we know that chords move like notes, yeah? That's an A, okay? I'm just going to use my first finger to hold down those three notes. I'm holding down the 5th, root, and the 3rd, the 5R3 chord. There. Just because chords move like notes, that's an A. So if I move it up a whole step, that's going to be a B. But look, if I turn that A shape there, instead of just having 3 notes there, I can bang that ring finger on. I'm arched over. I'm holding that little partial bar down there. If you find that tricky, then what you can do is, you notice my thumb. Get my thumb over the top. So you can do that there. It's whatever's comfy for your hands as well. Right, that's a B. Now if I move it up here, I'm going to get a C here. There's a D. Look at that. I'll just move up the chords. A, B, C, D. Apply that shape there. Put that shape on there. Now I'm going to move it to the destination chord for the lesson, which was this E at the 9th fret. Now here's the cool thing. What I like about this, and this is why it works wonderfully, is because we can add more depth to the chord. What we do is we add the thick E string in there as well, because if you think about it, if I put these 2 fingers on here, and where's my capo? Let me put my capo there. Look, I'm holding down the bar of the A shape there. I'm going to put my capo on there so I can clearly demonstrate the chord. So you see, that's where the G shape should live. Yeah, that's where it normally lives. But remember, all we're doing is we're putting that extra note on in there, right? And that gives us that first inversion there. But because I'm not having to hold that note down there with my pinky, it's at the 12th fret. Now, if we know anything about the 12th fret, what's significant about the 12th fret is if that's an E down here, then it's going to be an E up here at the 12th fret, because this is where the fretboard begins again. So we've got all these 12 frets, then we've got the dusty end as well, which is just a repeat of the first 12 frets, okay? This goes to 22 frets, this goes to 22 frets. If you've got a 24 fret guitar, chances are you'll have double dots on fret 24. And that's telling you that the octave is beginning again. And because that's the case, it means I do not need to hold that note down, but I can put it in now. There, so now I can hold that there. Yeah? So that is the E, that's an E major chord using this G shape in its first inversion form. Let me say that again. It is an E major chord using a G shape in first inversion. This is the third in the bass here. But really, what I've done, if I'm actually honest about it, I'm thinking of that shape as being that first inversion, but when I put that root in, it becomes a root position chord, in all honesty. It's just that the root is down there. Look at that. So if you can add that sound in there, it's brilliant. And that's a wonderful way to play an E, right? And you can bridge down to there with it. There are other E chords in between that you can go to if you want to. Now, because this is a major chord, so that's my root note. That's also the root note for my pentatonic scale. Yeah, so look, if I start from there, yeah, and that's actually my major pentatonic. You know the major pentatonic sound, you should have it in your head locked and loaded, because it is the riff from My Girl. Yeah, so you got that there. Now if I just carry that on, yeah. Now some of you might be thinking, well, if you start on your first finger, you get box 1 of your minor. So that's telling you what your relative minor is, and that's also the root note for chord 6. Because it's chord 6, you can see it as being a minor as well. There, look. Look how close that is to that. There's E. There's C sharp minor. I think it's a really useful one, seeing where your shapes are. But what's convenient about this is we have a lovely open E drone note. Okay, so we've got that. Yeah. We have a chord, but we have a scale that sits in the same position. So what you can do is you can play chords. You can play the bass note, just keep refreshing that E string just to keep that tonal reference, that tonal center. Now what's cool about this shape is, if you can get this might be comfier for you than bar chords. If you're playing an E bar chord like with an A shape there, and what I like about this is switching between these two. I've got this, like I say, this is the intersect between the A shape and the G shape, yeah? Which I'm thinking as that. What's nice is to kind of create this swooping effect on that A string. When you move from the A shape that's very straight sounding. I think that's very kind of solid, dependable major sound, but when you do that inversion, it just sounds a little bit more lush, a bit lovelier. Now, because we've got this scale underneath, yeah, then what we want to do is we want to utilize it as well. So we have this chord as a north star to help us to understand where we are, Yeah, but what we're going to do is we're going to implement the thing that I think that is the biggest takeaway that Jimi Hendrix took from Curtis Mayfield. If you listen to Curtis Mayfield, you'll hear it. It's that soulful sort of strumming idea. It's hammer-on double stops. So what we're doing is we're taking two of the notes from the scale. These just happen to be at the 9th fret, so I'm going to use the 9th fret on the A string and the 9th fret on the D string there, and I'm barring across. And then I'm going to hammer that 3rd finger on that same spot where it was going to go for the G shape here that we have, this new chord shape. Yeah. So I like doing that thing there, going from the 2nd to the major 3rd, and then playing that E chord there. But what we can do is we can hold that double stop there and hammer on the upper string. So the double stop is holding 2 notes down, but it isn't the lower note we're hammering on to. We're hammering on to the more bass notes. So this is more treble, this is the bass note. Now it's a subtle little movement. So you play the double stop like you would do a power chord, and then hammer on with that 3rd finger. But the beautiful thing about the box 1 pattern is that all your notes are in the row here. You've got a full row of notes across the fret. We want to utilize that. So it means we can double stop on the A and the D string there. And we can do it on the D and the G string as well. And it's exactly the same fingering. Now, when we get to this part of the scale, I do think that this can sound a bit off because going from the G to the B string, the tuning has changed on the guitar. So that becomes a major 3rd. So when we're doing that double stop, it can sound a bit off. So what we could do is we can compensate for that by turning it into a major 3rd. It's a little bit trickier as this one, but what you're doing is you're holding down, it looks like partly like a D shape, doesn't it? If you imagine a D shape like that. Then when we've got that way, then we're going to hammer on the scale note here as well. Now what I like about this, it moves up a whole step, does that idea there. Yeah, we can even get it there. So it will work, this idea. Now it will work as well when we extend that pentatonic, because remember, the pentatonic pattern looks like this. Okay. Sorry, that's using the 4th, going across there actually. Yep, so we turn that into a 4th. But like I said here, going on there, right? But what I like is, and if you've seen the lesson I did on extending your pentatonic, for me the most important part of extending your pentatonic first as a beginner is just to take this little, the House of Blues lives here. Yeah, but look, we get this little rectangle here. Because we get a little rectangle, we've got the 4th and we can hammer on. And we can also do it below. Yeah? Move that down a whole step from the pentatonic. So where that lives, yeah, those positions there. Now you can use that double stop idea, these 4ths here, kind of a nice sound as well. And Hendrix, I'm sure he used that, I can't remember which track it is. Now, I want to turn my attention, instead of just thinking of it as just a single chord in E, I want to think of this as like, okay, well I'm playing in E now. Yeah? Because this pentatonic is dictating that. So I'm gonna think, right, okay, well, what other chords do I need for a key of E? And then the most obvious ones for me are gonna be the 1, of which this one is, the 4 and the 5. And if we look at that, I'm gonna do this in the key of E. So I'm gonna have E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A, B, C sharp minor, D sharp diminished. But the first ones we're going to look at are these ones here. This is 1, 4, and 5. Those are the primary triads. Then we can look at 2, 3, and 6. That gives us a secondary triads. And like I say, we have the diminished at chord 7. But let's look at E, A, and B. And the thing that I was saying is if you struggle with bar chords, then a single finger bar chord that's only holding down 3 strings is easier than trying to hold down 6. I'm going to take that shape there, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to think to myself, well, what are my three primary triads? I've got an E, okay, we've got an A there, and then what happens is we've got a B here, and I'm not changing my shapes. Now you can hear I've got an effect on here. I've got some sort of tremolo, univibey thing going on there. And then what that does is it gives me that swirly, swooshy sound, which I'm trying to get a little bit more Hendrixified on it. So that's all I'm doing. I'm taking that same shape there. All the bar action is happening there on that first finger, just on 3 there. Okay? Got that there. I've got that there. Now the thing is, I know for a fact that John Mayer uses these chords, and John Frusciante from Red Hot Chili Peppers uses this chords and these ideas, and you can hear it. Frusciante's more of a clean Strat sound, obviously, but he uses them all the time. What I like about that, we're going to take advantage of this position here, and what I want to do is I just want to show you that what if we can get an E chord here using this G shape, what we can also do is if I just take this shape here and put that over there. Now if I take my bar off, can you see what shape that is? Yeah, so you can see where that is, that we're adding this to the mix as well. So that's a C shape, yes, so we can see that C shape with the bar underneath it. I'm still thinking about that G shape, where that lives as well. So that's why I'm keeping that first finger in place. So if I take that off, I've got an A note, which is the root note for my chord. So really, this is an adapted C shape, yeah? So we've got that going on there, and I'm strumming from the A string. I'm not hitting the E string. I'm strumming down the inside 4 strings there, and this gives me an A. Yeah, so listen, I can go from an A to an E. Really simple now. Now you do this thing here. I call this hinging, yeah, because it's almost like your fingers are on a hinge. So I've got the E chord just there, yeah. Actually, I'm just holding the A shape there when I'm thinking about it that way. And then what I can do is I can hinge these notes on. So it's almost like doing the hammer on with the double stop, but we're doing it with a bigger chord structure. So we're doing it with... Now this is a mainstay for a lot of 70s rock. You know, you'll know the shape. It's in a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's so it's a really, it should be a really familiar sort of sound as that. But the whole idea is to access this A major chord here, but using a completely different shape. But in context of this position, just keeping it in this position. There's an E, there's an A. Now if I want to, because this is an A, I can transpose the whole shape up a step and I get a B, but I can't play the A string because that's the root note of the A. I can get a little note cluster there, and it's just the triad that I'm getting there. Yeah, and when we do that, we've got to be careful with the hinging aspect as well when you move up to chord 5. Yes, so we've got all that going on there. Right, so for the B, what I might do, it's very simple, guys, because you don't need to play full shapes here. Look at that. I'm just holding down the E shape for the full B chord there. There's the B chord. See how close it is? There's the B chord. So that's my 5 chord. So there's my 1. Here's my 4. Here's my 5. Okay? Now I like to play that as a 7th as well. Because what you can do is you can jam around that now. By barring across there. Yeah, there's lots of stuff we can do with it. Okay, so here's the thing. This shape here, we can reutilize this again because the beautiful thing is it's almost like the F sharp minor, yeah? Which is kind of what I think to myself if I want to play something a bit more expressive in that area. I highlight the minor shape there. This is an A minor shape. Okay. That's chord 1. It's chord 2. So I can add that in there, and that just adds a little bit more complexity. But if you want to keep it simple with the pentatonics, so we get all that business going on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this chord down here, because remember, this is all based around this 9th fret idea. And if we look at the E string, we've got a C sharp just here. And that would be chord 6. Let's just look at this dianogram. We've got C sharp minor just there, so that's chord 6. Where else can I find the chord 6? Well, the chord 6 lives down here as well. So that's a C sharp. If I go A, B, C, C sharp, put that on there. There's the C sharp. So I put that there. There's my B. So I've got the A, B, and then I've got a C sharp just here. Now, I could put the E in if I wanted to. Yeah, and now what I'm doing is I'm spelling E again, which is kind of cool, because if you think about it, there's my C shape. Yeah. So, but if I don't play that E there on the A string, instead I borrow it from this thick E string. You can see there, that's my E. And then when I take this here, move it down to the B there, and I can play that A there as that little triad. Now, this is where I struggle. What Jimmy did was he had super long fingers, so he would hold down this shape here, this abbreviated A shape there. There's the full bar chord, and he wouldn't play it like that. He would play the barred notes with his thumb over the top. It's a bit of a struggle for me, but I'll try my best. But what was good about it was you could get this pinky on, and you could hammer on, and really, it's just a little hammer-on situation again. You've got a double stop with a hammer-on. There. But you're doing that with the pinky instead. Yeah? But you can cheat. Yeah, I've got to have to hold that there if I want the G chord. If I want it on an F. And onto the E there. Now Now what's cool, and this is where this pulls in as well from another lesson, page 63, lesson 57 in the book. Key of E major. Now I like these chords because we can lose all of our bars. We're going to tap into the majors and the minors. Probably leave that diminished out of there, wobbly bob. We'll see how we get on. But the idea here now is to create some textures. Now this is moving a little bit away from that sort of Hendrixy thing. Now here, look at this. Instead of playing an F sharp like this, what we're going to do is you're just going to hold down the 5th, the root, and the flat 3rd, and we're strumming all 6 strings. Okay, now I've got G sharp minor, which would be here, the 4th fret, but I'm not going to play it like that. I'm going to play it like this. Yes. And then I can move lovely to my B chord there. And there's my A. So it just gives me a little bit of movement. But the cool thing about this is, look at that 3rd finger. Look at my 3rd finger. We end up with something that I call a moving anchor when we move between the chords. Yeah, it's an anchor finger there. It's anchored on that one there. And then you see, that's why I call it a moving anchor. Sliding anchor up there, moving to those shapes. But these open strings are cool because if you think about it, this E is the tonic or the root note for the E major. The B is the 5th, and the thin E is another root or a tonic. So essentially we can strum all 6 strings with these shapes here. Play that there, or I could even just play an E shape there, and then pull myself back into the E just up here. So it's really interesting. Yeah, so there's the C sharp minor. See what I'm doing? I'm just integrating those sounds into that as well. Which is where you get into that kind of John Mayer-ish sound, yeah, because I know John Mayer uses these kind of open string chords in there as well. Always going to be kind of home here or here. Now the cool thing I think as well about this is if you're getting into the blues territory, we've got these hinging chords here, we've got these open string chords here, and then what we can do, it's a kind of a classical thing, it's called a tierce de Picardie, and basically what happens is this is all major, okay, this is all major, but what I can do is I can shift, and this is a kind of a critical move here. You see where my pinky is there, right? That's where I'm going to move my box 1 pattern to. So there you can see I'm in the minor pentatonic here. This is E minor pentatonic, yeah. And I'm shifting to the major pentatonic there, but I'm using the same box pattern. So I could be playing something here, and I want that mixture between the major and the minor. So what I do is now you could hear that I played the scale downwards in the minor, but then landed on a major sound, and that's the idea of this tierce de Picardie, okay? That's the whole idea behind that, because that's what you do when you're in a minor and in a major chord, the tonic 1. So if say you're in E minor, like let's play something in E minor. So I've got E minor there, yeah, so I'm in G, and ending on that, it just makes it sound triumphant, you know, instead of ending on a minor, which isn't as strong a resolution as a major is ever going to be. There's the minor. Okay. And then that major, just ending on the major, just gives you a really nice twist to it. To do that, then, you need to be able to shift your scale position. You could stay in the same position and play box 5 of the pentatonic, but it's easy to just add that same box 1 pattern that you know and love. Major, minor. There's the root note for that scale. And you can find little spots where just improvising completely around on this. So we can add all sorts of stuff like that. The main takeaways I want you to understand, we're looking at this chord here, and if we wanted that A, I'm going to make that A there. I would have my first finger barring along there, my second finger and my third finger on there, and I would have the A string open. It's still just tapping into that same idea here. And this is what I was going to finish on with this. This idea of connecting all the chords. I'm going to bridge that idea that I had with a C major chord. There's a C major chord. Now this is tapping back into the CAGED system. And this really does reveal the CAGED system a lot. So this is one. Right, so that's the C-shaped C, okay? We're going through the CAGED acronym here on this, so the C shape, okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at this finger here. The C and the A shape share their root note. There, so that would be the root note for the A shape, which we play here, okay? Now, what we've learned so far is we've got this C-shaped C, we've got an A-shaped C, and now we have a G-shaped C. So look, we're visualizing that note there because we're going to need that in a moment when we move up into the next shape in the CAGED system. But now we have this shape that we can bridge, so we don't have a gap chord-wise in between there. Look. And then that gives me my E shape here. So look, C shape, A shape, G shape, E shape. Now the D shape gets a little bit tricky, but this pulls me into another topic for another lesson, yeah? Which is another way of playing inversions, yeah? Which I absolutely adore. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna play this shape here. Now this is interesting because this is my root, this is my fifth, and there's my third. I've got my full triad there, but I'm not playing the A string. Really, this is borrowed from the D shape. You see, there's a D shape. If I play that in first inversion, you know that as this chord down here. If you play that one there, then that's all I'm playing here, really. But I'm doing it with a C major chord instead. Look at that. That one lives there. But I've got a choice whether I want to play it like that. And because I've hit the 12th fret, I'm essentially back to my C shape, which I can now play using this idea here. But now I have this version of the C here, and I'm thinking of this as being a D shape. So this is a D shape open triad, yes indeed. You can play it like this as well. That helps. But I just prefer to play it like this. because we can voice lead on the E string there. But let me just play those chords going up there for you, and you'll see that we have a C chord in every position. And you want to get to this so that you're not playing a C here, you're not playing a C there and then a C up here, and that's all you've got is 3 positions. You've got your open position, an A bar chord and an E bar chord. What we want to do is a C-shaped C, A-shaped C, G-shaped C, E-shaped C, and then we've got this D-shaped here, and that goes up C, A, G, E, D, and that's playing the caged all the way up there, yeah? So we've got this going on here. And it's nice to just move using this shape here. If I'm playing in a C down here, I can use that shape now to get to the G shape from the C shape there. And my scale, because I know where that is. I know where my scale is going to live precisely.